Today we are doing our Chargers buy or sell, getting into the biggest storylines and overreactions, and we're going to tell you why we are buying that Derwin James can return to his All-Pro form.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Drogemeyer, and we've been covering the Chargers together now for 8 seasons, but this is our 6th year as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you to the everydayers out there for making us your first listener. To make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from. David, what do we got today?
Daniel, I believe Derwin James can return to All-Pro form, but if he wants to do that, he needs to be better in coverage, get more interceptions, and cut down his missed tackle rate if he wants to get back in that conversation. Also, a sub-500 record this season under Jim Harbaugh would be a failure. The expectations that come with Jim Harbaugh say that the Chargers should be a good football team, and also why the Chargers should be a much better football team in crunch time.
That'll be huge, man. I mean, how many times last season did we see them collapse late? And you're talking about a 5-win season that felt like it could have been much more, even with Justin Herbert's injuries, had they just closed out some of those games. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Dave, we're getting into buy or sell today, and this one is one that you brought to me, a really good one that I think is worth discussing. And the buy or sell is this: Derwin James can return to his All-Pro form. We're talking about a Derwin James that is coming off of potentially his worst season, if not the worst season, one of his worst seasons. It looked like a shell of himself for parts of last year, and it felt like it was kind of trending in that direction under Brandon Staley and what they were asking him on this defense, and just physically was dealing with a lot over the last couple of years too. But I'm buying it, and I think when I reason with myself, I mean, it's hard for me to doubt him. I mean, he's such... it's hard not to let his kind of personality play into it, because he's just such an easy guy to root for.
Yeah.
He's one of the faces of the franchise. He's only 27 years old, and I think right now, last year is still the outlier performance out of the time he's had in the NFL so far. And I think about the biggest reasons he could do it. I think a change of scenery in this case, even though he's staying home, getting a new coaching staff is going to help a lot. You have someone in Jesse Minter where you've seen a safety in that defense in the NFL win All-Pro with Kyle Hamilton last year. You have Chris O'Leary, who coached Kyle Hamilton at Notre Dame, and it feels like those are the right guys in charge of being able to bring out what made Derwin special to begin with.
Also, I just think that last year it was pretty evident to me that they were just asking Derwin James to do way too many different things. I think when Brandon Staley was relieved of his duties and Derek Ansley became the defensive coordinator, he gave Derwin more of a singular focus. He said, hey, I want you to go out here and concentrate on doing these few things. And I felt like we saw Derwin James play much better football. But if Derwin James wants to get back to All-Pro form, I think a good way to start is to look at Kyle Hamilton and where his stats were last year when he achieved first-team All-Pro. 81 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 4 interceptions. Okay, that's a big one right there. And also, his reception percentage was fantastic. He only allowed 37 receptions on 61 targets, which was crazy. Last year, Derwin James, 125 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 14 missed tackles, only 2 sacks, and only 1 interception, and his reception percentage was over 70%. 40 receptions allowed on 57 targets. So Derwin James needs to rack up more interceptions, needs to be better in coverage, and needs to rack up those sack numbers that we know he is capable of doing. If he gets back to stuffing the stat sheet like we know he is capable of, then Derwin James absolutely can, and I expect him to return to All-Pro form.
The thing about Derwin, too, I mean, we're talking about if you're All-Pro, you basically have to be, if you're first or second team, one of the top 4 safeties in the league. And there's a lot of competition there, including Kyle Hamilton. And they're not the same player. So even though you say, hey, these are the guys that were in charge of helping him get to the levels that he reached, making him a first-round pick in Chris O'Leary's case, and also him being an All-Pro in Mike McDonald's case, running that defense that Jesse Minter is now running and tinkering with, they're not the same player. And so I think that's important. But I think when you've done it already before, voters are easily able to kind of jump back in on the Derwin James bandwagon. Like, he plays such an exciting type of football.
No doubt.
I think the other big thing is, can he get out of his own head as far as, how many penalties we saw him rack up and how much that seemed to kind of affect him actually getting suspended for a game because of it, him getting a concussion because of it, him kind of getting that, moniker of being a guy that lays out dirty hits and having the refs call him kind of unjustly a couple of times, in my opinion, too.
For sure.
I think the biggest thing that scares you in this is if he can be the same athlete. Like, in coverage, he just didn't look like the same athlete last year. And that's the part that gives me some reservations here. I mean, we're talking about a dude who's had 2 torn meniscuses, a foot stress fracture that cost him most of his season, and, some soft tissue hamstring type of stuff that could get in the way of this, right? You have to play pretty much a full season. But if he does play that full season, I think that we could see much more out of him than we saw last year, and really just in the Brandon Staley era in general, where he just never really looked like that same guy. Let's get to the next buy or sell here from John Clark, who says this: buy or sell, the Chargers will still make a free agent signing or signings in the secondary, either at cornerback or safety or both, before we play the Raiders on the opening weekend. Buy or sell?
Yeah, I think as much as I'd like to see this happen, honestly, I think I'm going to sell it. I think right now the Chargers are effectively done with free agency unless somebody gets hurt. I just think at this point they are ready to take the men that they have with them to training camp, see how that works, and see if that's going to be enough. And I think that they're probably going to stick with the men that they have, barring a significant injury, and then they'll have to go out and grab somebody.
It's hard because you don't know how they feel about it, right?
Right.
We only know how we feel about it. And if it was up to us, I think we would both agree that they should add one or both of these positions.
Yep.
I'm going to buy it just because it just feels like with Joe Ortiz, there's no real windows of time he's not going to do something. There's no amount of guys on the roster that he can't still see if he can make something work. And I think that that's the reason I would buy it. And I think the big thing is, first of all, both rooms need competition. Sure. Starting and backup corner, I would say. I mean, right now, on the outside, your primary backups are either Dean Leonard, a former 7th round pick, and then you also have a rookie in Cam Hart. Those are your primary outside backups right now, let alone somebody to push Christian Fulton, which I'm hoping for a bounce-back season as much as anyone else. It's still a guy that, with what he's done the last 2 seasons, probably should be just the automatic guy there, even though it seems like that's kind of what they envision him. At safety, right now you have undrafted free agents, a former 3rd-round pick in JT Woods, who has never really fit or been able to make it work at the NFL level, and another undrafted free agent, AJ Finley, that stick around last year, mostly was a special teamer, fighting for the 3rd safety spot on this team, a key spot for this team. And you have those guys battling it out for it. So if they added a veteran there, I would totally understand it, and it would not surprise me in the least. So let's get to this last one here in segment 1 from Edgar S., who says, buy or sell, the Chargers still have yet to unveil an alternate helmet. I'm going to buy it. I don't know if it'll be this year, but I would almost guarantee with between 2024 and 2025, they will unveil a special helmet. I know they're probably being careful with it because they have the best jerseys in the league, and part of the reason is they don't mess with it too much and they stick to what works. But I think we're getting a dark navy helmet at some point, David. I'd be shocked if we don't see that in the next year or two.
I'm buying it as well. It's kind of the reason why I went with the navy colors today. I do expect that they will be adding an alternate helmet, and I also expect it to be the navy blue. It just seems like the natural fit. Seems like that's something that they want to bring back. They want to be a physical football team. They want to probably try to embody that a little bit, and they might go with some darker colors to be able to accomplish that mission. So I do expect that navy helmet, and I'd hope that they get it right because, like you said, the Chargers have the best uniforms in all of the National Football League, honestly, to me, in all of professional sports. So take your time, get it right, and can't wait to see it.
And the biggest reason they would look awesome. And another reason is that's what this guy wore. I mean, those who are listening, I have a Jim Harbaugh shirt on right now. That's what the colors were when Jim Harbaugh was playing quarterback for the Chargers in the Ryan Leaf days. So it makes too much sense. That is also the last time that we saw the Chargers be a physical type of football team is when they were wearing those jerseys. So I think it just makes way, way too much sense. I think it would look really, really cool, and I definitely think we're going to get it. But we still have much more to get to on this Buy or Sell Tuesday, including why we believe it is a failure if the Chargers don't have a winning record in 2024. And we're getting into that and much more in today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, though, I need to tell you guys about Game Time, because Game Time is now an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets even faster and easier, and prices on the Game Time app will actually go down the closer it gets to the first pitch. Like I said yesterday, David actually used Game Time to get tickets to Padres Yankees last weekend when he was in town, but you can make sure you're checking it. If you have a professional baseball team near you, make sure you're checking the Game Time app, because you know you are going to get the best prices, because with Game Time, you get the Game Time guarantee, meaning if you find a ticket on another site for less, that's the same seat in the same row and section, you can get 110% of the difference with Game Time. And if you guys want to go check out any of the playoffs that are still going on around you potentially, go to Game Time, because not only are you guaranteed to get the best price, but you can also toggle the features on the app to make sure you're getting all-in pricing, so you know exactly what you're paying before you get to the final checkout. It's the best ticketing app around by far, and you can save some money because you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Now you're talking about a Game Time guarantee plus an additional $20 off. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. David, let's continue this buy or sell, getting into the Chargers' biggest storylines and overreactions, and especially I think in a new year with a new regime coming in. We're all very hopeful, and maybe the hope gets a little bit too wild, and maybe, we're all cautiously optimistic. Maybe some of us are just fully optimistic that everything is going to turn around and the Chargers are going to be great in 2024 under Jim Harbaugh, which is a possibility for sure. But this buy or sell, I really like something that you brought up earlier. Buy or sell, if the Chargers finish with a sub 500 record, the season should be considered a failure.
Yeah, I'm buying it. I mean, when you bring in a head coach like Jim Harbaugh, who has the record that he has, especially in the NFL, Jim Harbaugh has never finished worse than 500 in his NFL career. Obviously, that can't happen now that you have a 17-game season. So either you're going to be above it or you're going to be below it. That's going to be it. But I think when you bring in Jim Harbaugh, when you pay him the type of money that you paid him, that comes with certain expectations. Those expectations are to win and win immediately. I mean, that's just what it is. And I think when you couple that with the softer schedule that they have right now, I think anything under a 500, not finishing over 500 would be considered a failure in my eyes.
Yeah, and this is assuming that you get Justin Herbert for 17
of
games,
course,
right?
Of course.
I have to buy it too, and I think it's totally unfair. Like, I don't think that many GMs or head coaches taking on the situation that Jim Harbaugh is taking, where your team is, $60 million over the cap. You have to basically retool the entire roster, make it try to play a completely different brand of football. You're probably not going to be expected to do that in year one. I think when you're talking about first-year head coaches, you're talking about guys, especially if you have the pedigree of Jim Harbaugh, that would have some leash to try to build it and build it the right way. I think the difference is with Jim Harbaugh, obviously this time around, he gets a guy in Joe Ortiz that he got to basically handpick, at least as far as I'm concerned. I believe that's kind of what happened. At the same time, for me, any season that Justin Herbert plays 17 games, I expect you to make the playoffs. And I think that anytime Justin Herbert doesn't make the playoffs and you can't put a team around Justin Herbert that doesn't make the playoffs, that is a failure. Now it only is kind of, even put more of a spotlight on now, because now you have Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. You're telling me Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert, even with some obvious flaws in this roster, can't get to 9-8? I think it's a failure, and I think they absolutely could do it. I think 9 wins is very, very attainable for this team. Like you said, Jim Harbaugh's never had a losing season, but you're also overhauling the roster. You're basically switching out the entire offensive weapons core that you had last year and a bunch of guys who were mainstays for a long time. It might be an unreasonable ask. They're trying to do a lot. They're trying to move a mountain in an offseason. But I just think that with Jim Harbaugh and with Justin Herbert, they are going to be able to do it. So let's get to this next one here from Prefontaine, who says, the Chargers last year had 5 games. They went over 100 rushing yards. Buy or sell that they double that this year? David, are you buying or selling it?
I'm going to buy it. And I'm going to bring up some pretty fantastic stats from Greg Roman here, the offensive coordinator. Greg Roman, his teams have eclipsed 100-plus rushing yards in 30 have not eclipsed 100 rushing yards in only 30 of a possible 162 games over 10 seasons with 3 different teams. Greg Roman knows how to build rushing offenses. He has done it at several different stops and has done it effectively. That is exactly what he's going to do for the Chargers. I have absolutely no reason not to believe that is going to happen. Greg Roman is going to do that because that is what he has done every single place that he has been. The Chargers absolutely will have more than 10 games of 100+ rushing yards. That's no question. You can take it to the bank.
Yeah, it does feel like this is one you could ride in stone for this season. I'm buying it as well. Maybe it is just me fully drinking the Greg Roman Kool-Aid, but it just feels like it has to happen. I also thought it was interesting, in addition to the numbers that you brought up, that in 2011, his first year in the NFL with the 49ers, the first 3 games, they were under 100 yards every single game on the ground, and then they eclipsed it 10 out of the next 13 games that season. And that was even with them starting slow.
Yeah.
Every game in the 2019 and 2020 season with the Baltimore Ravens, they eclipsed 100 rushing yards. Every single game. I mean, when you're talking about his whole Ravens tenure, I believe he had 4 games in which they didn't eclipse 100 yards, including a playoff game. So I had that 14 out of 17 in 2021 and 17 out of 18 in 2022. So it feels like a given under Greg Roman. I'd say that you are obviously expecting a lot of positions to improve. Another thing that it's like you're doing it solely almost based on bringing in Greg Roman and also the new stable of running backs that you have, which obviously all those guys have to stay healthy as well. But it does feel like it's something, that they absolutely should attain. And I don't expect it to be every game like in Baltimore. You don't have Lamar Jackson. That's going to get you over 100 rushing yards.
Yeah.
In a lot of games. And so I think that's kind of unrealistic to expect, but 10 games feels very doable for this new offense under Greg Roman and the new kind of, style that the Jim Harbaugh era is bringing in. So let's get this next one from Herbert's Burner, who says, buy or sell, Ladd McConkey beats out Josh Palmer for wide receiver 1 by the end of the season stats-wise. Are you buying or selling that?
Yeah, I mean, this might surprise a few people, but I am going to buy it. I just feel like McConkey's quickness and his ability to create separation is going to allow him to establish chemistry and trust with Justin Herbert very, very quickly. And so I think he's going to, quickly become that number 1 target because he's going to get open so quickly. I love Josh Palmer. I love his ability. I love the way he works. This guy is definitely one of those guys that's first in, last out type of guys, and I really appreciate that. But there's just a difference in skill set here, and McConkey's ability to get open quickly, I think is going to be the reason why he's going to be able to eclipse Josh Palmer's stats.
Yeah, I'm going to sell it. Maybe I just had to wait and see it. I mean, the other thing is obviously Ladd McConkey only surpassed 700 receiving yards once in college, right? And what's the main reason? There's other great players there, which is part of it, but the other thing is injuries. And I honestly think for this buy or sell, whichever of these guys has the healthier season is probably the one that does it, because it's hard to imagine both these guys play 17 games. And I think that it could be kind of a mix and match here. Like, I think you could see Josh Palmer have more touchdowns. I think you could see Ladd McConkey getting more receptions. I think you could see Josh Palmer having more yards. So it might not just be one of them gets the triple crown between the two of them and leads in every category, but if one of them stays more healthy than the other one, they definitely could. But I think that right now, given the fact that almost half the wide receivers we're going to talk about with this team are rookies, he is the best wide receiver, most proven wide receiver, most recently on this team, outside of a DJ Chark 1,000-yard 2019 season that feels like ages ago. So I'm bullish on what DJ Chark can bounce back and be. I love Ladd McConkey as much as anybody. I think it was a great pick by the Chargers, but weighing 180 pounds, I mean, even seeing him out there on the field at OTAs, you have to be lying to yourself if you don't think to yourself, man, that is a small dude, right? Like, I know I felt it when I saw him out at OTAs. He was small in college football as well, and it didn't stop him. We've seen more, instances of players at the NFL being able to succeed at smaller sizes. Sure. I mean, look at someone like a Devonta Smith for the Eagles that's able to do it at a very similar size. But it's still shocking, right? And that's a guy that lives in the middle of the field, is going to be making a lot of plays in the middle of the field, especially if he's going to be playing in the slot. In a 17-game season, much more than he's ever played in 1 year. So I like Ladd McConkey. I think the hype train might be getting a little bit too far in front of itself, But I also have no idea how this regime feels about Josh Palmer, right? Because they went out and drafted 3 receivers, brought in a receiver in DJ Chark, and have talked much more about Quentin Johnson than they have about Josh Palmer. So I think that's the other hard part here. But I think as far as what they've done at the NFL level recently, I think Josh Palmer is the number one guy they have right now and is being slept on if this team wants to use him in that way. So we still have much more to get to on this buy or sell Tuesday, including why we think and are buying that the Chargers will be much better in one-score games and in the clutch in 2024 than they were in 2023, where they were an absolute disaster, and more on today's Locked On Chargers podcast. First, I need to tell you guys about FanDuel because it's winner take all time right now in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. That means you can pick the biggest favorites even on the money line, and if they win, you get $150 in bonus bets. And one of the things that takes playoffs to another level is by using FanDuel with it. I know for me, it's me, the Florida Ice Cats, the Panthers tonight over who they're playing right now, and I think they can win by 2 against the Rangers. You can get them at plus 155 to win by 2 goals or more. I think this is a big win at home for the Florida Panthers tonight, so that's where I'd be going with it. But if you guys want to get involved, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, David, well, we have more buy or sells to get into, but I do want to make sure everyone is checking out Locked On Sports today, because if you guys are watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, but you have to turn down the volume with all that shouting, you can make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you analysis that you can't miss, opinions and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or for free on the Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. David, this is another buy or sell that I brought up. Very close to Chris Saez, who brought up a very similar one, but I wanted to make the buy or sell this. Buy or sell, the Chargers will be much better in one-score games than they were in 2023, a year in which they went 3-7 in one-score games last year. Obviously terrible. And it cost them, it felt like time and time again they failed to come through in the big moments. Are you buying that they'll be better than that in 2024?
I am. I am buying it, and there's several reasons why. Number one, they're going to be better coached. I mean, that's, I think, first and foremost when you got Jim Harbaugh at the helm. This is a guy who knows how to win. I mean, he's just done it at every single place that he's been. Also, they're going to be able to run the football a lot more effectively and be able to put more games away, which they did not have any semblance of a running game last year or really any year under Brandon Staley's tenure. So it's been a long time since they've had that element to their offense. And also defensively, I think they'll be able to get more stops and they'll be able to allow less explosive plays, especially in those crunch times. I just have a lot more trust in Jesse Minter's style of defense because we've seen it translate to the NFL and we know that it works. So I think those are the reasons why I am buying it, and I feel like the Chargers will be much better in the one-score games.
Yeah, I'm buying it too. I don't think it's an overreaction at all to think that they're going to be much better. I mean, 3-7 last year. They were 7-5 in 2022, and just even playing 12 one-score games just is the life of a Chargers fan, right? I mean, You're talking about 22 one-score games out of a 34 possible games for Chargers fans and their heart rate to have to deal with over the last 2 seasons. So one of the things about Jim Harbaugh that I really loved that I got to see from him during the college football playoffs last year is, first of all, game against Alabama. You're down a touchdown late. You have 4th downs where you could argue, hey, you could punt it. You have timeouts. You could get the ball back. They don't do that, though. Even with J.J. McCarthy, even a run-heavy team, they put the ball in his hands. They go and they convert. And they came back. They tied the game right there. They went on to win in overtime. They beat, the dynasty that is Alabama. Obviously, one of the best teams that we've ever seen. One of the best runs from any college football program that we've seen in college football history.
Oh, yeah.
And then they showed me something different against Washington in the national championship game. One of the most prolific offenses in the NFL or in the college football landscape.
Yeah.
And they totally neutered them, right?
Oh, yeah.
And there was a couple of times where Washington would come back a little bit, but Michigan put their foot on their throat. Jesse Minter put his foot on their throat, and they throttled him, and they never let them get back in the game. And one of the reasons the Chargers have been in so many close games is letting teams come back. Like Justin Herbert always gets hated on for how he dealt with late game situations last year, and he wasn't good. First of all, the protection should be better this year, which is going to be a huge reason why I think it's going to be better as far as the results in close games. The other thing is the Chargers gave up game-winning drives that Justin Herbert would have had so many times over the last 3 years. Like, how many times have we seen Justin Herbert with 4 minutes left put the team up 3, put the team up 7 against the Chiefs? And the other team comes back and just has every answer for what Brandon Staley's defense is going to throw to them in those moments. So yeah. I think they will be much better under Jim Harbaugh. I'm glad I got to see him do it, see Jesse Minter do it on the biggest stages last year in college football. And I also hope that this pass rush that I think is the best, most deep pass rush in the league can help you close out more games when it comes down to that at the end of games. So I love that. Teams were always able to get pressure against Kellen Moore's offense, and Justin Herbert and Chargers and Brandon Staley just were never able to get the pressure they needed late in those games, and I think both of those things can change under this new regime. So let's get to this next one here from Drew Bannon, who says, buy or sell, Bosa and Mack, Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa, both stay with the Chargers until they decide to hang up the cleats. As always, bolt up from one of your top military fans. We salute you, sir. David, are you buying or selling this one?
Yeah, I love both these guys, but I think it's, for me, I'm going to sell it. I think that the Chargers will retain Khalil Mack's services until he retires, which I suspect maybe after this season. I think this might be one of the last seasons that Khalil Mack has in the tank here. With Joey Bosa, it's just the injuries and the inconsistency of his availability that makes me feel like I just can't trust the fact that he's going to be able to play a full season at this point in his career. It's just, I have to see it. I have to see it before I can believe it, and I just haven't seen it in a very long time. So I feel like he's still a guy that's a cut candidate, and I think that may happen. So that's why I'm going to sell it.
Oh, well, let's clarify something. He's not a cut candidate this year. You're talking about in 2025.
Correct.
I would sell it for different reasons. I think that for Khalil Mack, the big thing here is what happened when he took his pay cut. One of the biggest sticking points when he took his pay cut was, I'll do it, but you cannot franchise tag me after this upcoming season. Right. That was part of his new contract. Why do that? Why have that be a sticking point unless you're planning on potentially getting out of Los Angeles in 2025 and beyond if you want to keep playing that way? Also, you're not going to pay both of those guys. You signed Bud Dupree to a 2-year deal. You have Tuli Tuipulotu under contract for the next 3 seasons. I think the bigger thing with Joey Bosa, as opposed to just him not playing games and things like that, obviously that's part of it, why you would want to keep him or not keep him. But it's a $36 million cap hit in 2025 that you're talking about, right?
A lot of money.
They would save $25 million by releasing him. Could they come to the table and ask him to take another pay cut? Sure. Would he probably do that? I wouldn't if I were him after helping them out this year. He took a straight pay cut for part of that this year. So those are the reasons. Mack did talk about, that's the only way I see Mack doing it is if he just retires after this season, for sure. But if that's the case, why go out of your way to make that a kind of sticking point in your new contract that the Chargers can't franchise tag you and keep yourself around? Yeah, but that's something you don't see very often. I can't think of another situation where you have someone with a contract saying, I cannot be franchise tagged after this year. So I think one or both of them is gone after this upcoming season. Wish them both the best, and it's hard for me to imagine that neither one of those guys is going to keep playing or isn't going to play after 2024. So let's get to this last one here quick from Boomer, who says, buy or sell, Tuli will don the captain's badge this season. I think this is in part because of a heartwarming video which you see Jim Harbaugh talking to his new defensive coordinator, Jesse Minter, saying, man, have you seen how Tuli has just been first on every drill? He's the first one up. He's trying to teach guys. He's going through it quickly and doing, 100%. And he said, I'm going to shout him out in front of the team later, in front of everyone. And it was awesome. Yeah. That being said, I'm selling this. I don't think, depending on how they do the captains, right? If we're talking about different captains every game, I'm sure he'll get one of them in one of these games. If we're talking about picking 4 captains and keeping those guys for the full season, I would sell it.
I'm selling it too, because as long as Khalil Mack is going to be here in that edge room, he's going to be the captain. I think that he's already just showcased all the different reasons why he should be the captain. So I'm going to sell it.
Yeah, if you're talking about defensive captains, Derwin James isn't going anywhere. Derwin James is going to be captain. Khalil Mack, I have to believe, is going to be captain, even though, we'll see under Jim Harbaugh, right? Because, he did go out of his way to say he thought Joey Bosa played better than Khalil Mack last year before he got hurt, which I thought was interesting. He's definitely not praising Khalil Mack the same way that Brandon Staley put him on a pedestal and, prayed at the altar of Khalil Mack. It's a different vibe. And Khalil Mack, to his credit, deserves all of it, right?
Oh, no question about it.
He's great. He's a great leader. He leads by example.
Yeah.
Tuli Tuipulotu will be a captain for this team before his time is done in Los Angeles. I just don't think it's going to be this year. So if you're talking about overall, will he be one? Buying it. For this year, I'm selling it. Yeah. But thank you guys for checking out today's show. Make sure you are back here tomorrow, because tomorrow we are bringing on Chargers' new free agent signing, Bradley Bozeman, the new center for this team in 2024 and beyond, potentially, to talk about a bunch of things. So to make sure you guys don't miss it, go subscribe or follow for free on the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and listen wherever you get your podcast from, as well as finding the show where we'll put it out with Bradley Bozeman on Twitter at Locked On LAC, on Instagram at Locked On Chargers, and our Locked On Chargers Facebook page. Me and David, I'm sure we'll be blasting it everywhere. You can find me at Dan Talk Sports and David Drogemeyer at Dro Talk ST. Special guest tomorrow. Make sure you guys are back here for Bradley Bozeman. It's going to be a great one. But until then, guys, take it easy and go Bolts.